everybody, it's Dr. Taylor, Undergraduate Exercise Science Program Director and Associate Teaching Professor at the University of Kansas, and welcome to another edition of Fitness Facts. If you're just starting a resistance training routine, maybe you've been lifting weights for a month or so, you may wonder why you've gained muscle strength but not any noticeable increase in muscle mass. Today I will discuss why muscle strength always increases before muscle size when beginning a resistance training program. Okay, so before I get into talking about why you gain muscle strength before you gain muscle mass and size, I want to review some basic neuromuscular principles. All right, so we need to talk about the motor neuron first. So what is a motor neuron? Well, it's a component of the nervous system. Remember, we have many different types of neurons. But a motor neuron, basically what it does is it transmits signals known as action potentials. These are electrochemical impulses away from the brain and spinal cord to muscles, also to glands. It's a different type of motor neuron. But each motor neuron is connected to muscle fibers at what's called the neuromuscular junction. Okay, so they synapse or innervate muscle fibers. Okay. Now, at the neuromuscular junction, there's a neurotransmitter released known as ACH, which is acetylcholine. And motor neurons release this neurotransmitter that then can cross this little synaptic space and bind to receptors that are located on the sarcolemma, which is the cell membrane of a muscle fiber. All right. So once acetylcholine binds to receptors on the sarcolemma, the next thing that happens is sodium ions will influx into a muscle fiber, all right? That's going to create a more positive environment inside the cell because sodium ions have a positive charge. So the inside of the muscle fiber becomes more positive. And that stimulates then the release of calcium, another positively charged ion, to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum inside of a muscle cell. Once calcium is released, calcium then binds to a protein called troponin, which is located on the actin filament. The actin filament is one of the contractile proteins that shortens when you are undergoing a muscle contraction. Okay? So again, calcium release is important here for muscle contraction. Also, for muscle contraction to occur, we not only have to have calcium binding to troponin on the actin filament and shifting tropomyosin out of the way, we have to have myosin. It's another protein, contractile filament in muscle. Myosin has to form a cross bridge and connect with actin, okay? So myosin has a little head on it that, under the influence of calcium, that myosin head will reach out and grab onto the actin filament, and then with the assistance of the breakdown of ATP into ADP and inorganic phosphate, when those molecules are released, that myosin head will tilt and literally pull on the actin filament, and then that leads to shortening and a muscle contraction. Okay, so I discussed what a motor neuron is. Now let's talk about what a motor unit is. Okay, so a motor unit consists of a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers that it innervates, that it's connected to, okay? So why is that important? Well, let's think about what's occurring in a typical muscle contraction. The number of motor units, and therefore active muscle fibers, responding within a muscle contraction can vary, and it depends on the number of muscle fibers within each activated motor unit and the number of motor units that are activated, okay? And then this ties into how our nervous system can vary force production within our muscles. So there's two ways that our nervous system can control how much force our muscles produce. One is by increasing the recruitment of motor units, okay? So if you have an increase in the recruitment of motor units, you're going to have an increase in force production because more muscle fibers get activated, all right? So think of it this way. If you need to move a heavy couch, you're one motor unit, all right, and you're going to try to lift that couch. You produce a little bit of force, but maybe not enough to move that load because it's a heavy load. So if you want to move a heavy load, you need to recruit more motor units. So you call up some buddies, 2 or 3 more motor units come over, you're going to produce more force, right? So again, motor unit recruitment, you're going to have more muscle fibers active, and you're going to be able to produce more force. Okay, so the second mechanism that our nervous system uses to vary force production is rate coding, all right? So rate coding deals with motor units that are already active and firing. These motor neurons in a motor unit fire at different rates depending on, like the load that you're lifting. So let's say you're lifting a light load, like bench pressing 50 pounds. I guess light is relative, but 50 pounds, all right? A motor neuron in a motor unit might be firing at a rate of 20 times per second. But then let's say you add some weight to the bar, you go up to 100 or 150 pounds, that same motor unit may now start firing at a rate of 30 times per second. And so a faster motor unit firing rate is going to increase force production. All right, so now to the meat and potatoes. Why do we see an increase in strength before size? Well, initially this is related to some of these chronic adaptations that occur over the first couple months of beginning a resistance training program. So typically you see a strength increase in the first 1 to 2 months of a resistance training program because there are changes that occur in the nervous system. So there are neural adaptations. So let's look at some of these neural adaptations that are going to occur in the first 4 to 8 weeks with say, a newbie, someone that's just beginning a resistance training program. Well, first, you're going to see improvements in their skill, motor learning within the brain. They start to learn correct movement patterns, and they become more coordinated. You can probably think, and I know I can think back to high school when I first started lifting weights. I was all over the place doing different movements initially and shaking and didn't have the coordination and good control, just wasn't skilled. So there's adaptations that occur in the first 1 to 2 months where those things improve. Next is an improvement in or an increase in motor unit recruitment. So your nervous system learns how to recruit more motor units to increase force production. If you increase force production within various muscle groups, then that's obviously you're going to be stronger, okay? Also an increased ability to recruit type 2 motor units, okay? So type 2 motor units are motor neurons that are connected to fast twitch muscle fibers. And fast twitch muscle fibers, type 2 muscle fibers, are known to be able to produce more force than type 1, okay? Next, an increase in maximal motor unit firing rates, okay? So this is the rate at which a motor neuron is sending signals or action potentials down to the muscle fibers it's connected to. So over the first couple months of training, you see improvements in the maximal rate that these motor units can fire action potentials, which leads to increases in force production. And these aren't in red for any particular reason. It's just my green marker was running out of ink. So decreases in co-contraction, which means that as you become more skilled and you learn how to perform various resistance training movements, the agonist muscle, the primary muscle, is going to be active in performing the lift, whereas the antagonist muscles will not be recruited, and they're going to allow you to perform that lift more efficiently. Sometimes in people that are just beginning a resistance training program, there may be some antagonist activation that's kind of fighting against the agonist muscle, and that can kind of prevent smooth movement, okay? Last, increase in motor unit synchronization. So this is where the nervous system learns how to turn on many, many motor units all at once, which is going to allow for more muscle fibers to be activated and greater amounts of force production, because it's kind of like just switching on all the light switches at one time, and bam, you have all these motor units and muscle fibers active together, which really helps to increase force production. All right, so now we talked about the neurological adaptations that occur with resistance training. Let's get into the muscular adaptations that occur. So after about 8 weeks of consistent training, you start to notice some muscle hypertrophy occurring, right? So you start to see noticeable changes in muscle size after approximately 8 weeks. Some people it may be earlier, 6, 4 weeks, but 8 weeks is about right. So what is hypertrophy? Well, that's just an increase in muscle size due to an increase in muscle fibers diameter, okay? Resistance training sessions, when they're performed frequently will stimulate increased muscle protein synthesis. So after 24 to 36 hours after a resistance training session, within that time frame, you're going to have an increase in the number of actin and myosin filaments that are synthesized and formed in each muscle fiber. If you have more of those proteins built and formed in each muscle fiber, that's going to lead to a larger fiber, right? So increased diameter, which is hypertrophy. And then this is going to allow for increased force production and strength because you have more of these contractile proteins packed into each individual fiber, and overall you have a larger muscle. Okay. You should now have a better understanding of why gains in muscle strength come before gains in muscle mass. I hope you enjoyed this fitness facts video. Thanks for watching.